Hello and welcome back to 80K Aquatics, and today we are talking about aquatic snails and whether or not they are a nuisance in the hobby. To do this, I will be looking at several different species of snails, the pros and cons of keeping snails, and then I will come to my final verdict on the question. There are many types of aquatic snails that come in many different sizes. The smallest of these snails are the bladder snails, or Ficella acuta. These snails only get about half an inch long when they are fully grown, and are prolific breeders. They are commonly referred to as pond snails. Another common snail is the Malaysian trumpet snail. These snails are very unique in multiple ways. They are a burrowing snail, as they like to dig under the substrate and usually only come to the surface during the night to feed on any leftover food or algae. These snails are very helpful as they aerate the substrate and clean up any leftover waste. They will populate a tank quickly as they can reproduce asexually and create copies of themselves. Another common species is the mystery or apple snail. These snails are larger than the others mentioned as they can grow up to 1.5 inches long. These snails are really cool looking and can come in many colors. They can also be prolific breeders, but they need the water level to be dropped a few inches for breeding to occur. Ram's horn snails are another very popular snail in the hobby with their unique shell shape that gives them their name. They can get about an inch long and can reproduce asexually like Malaysian trumpet snails, as they can lay clusters of eggs that become tiny snails. Nerite snails are another wildly popular snail because they come in many different interesting shapes and colors, but the main reason they are popular is because they only breed in saltwater, which makes it impossible for them to take over your tanks. They are also very good algae eaters, which increases the allure of getting them. Now I'm going to go over the pros and cons of having snails in your aquarium, which will help me come to my final conclusion as to whether snails are pests or pets. One of the pros of having snails in your aquarium is that they are really good at cleaning up excess waste. This is helpful if you accidentally overfeed your tank, as any leftover food will be broken down by the snails before it can pollute the tank. Having the snails eat any leftover food is better than the food rotting in the tank, because when it rots it releases much more ammonia than the amount of ammonia that would be released from the snails eating it and digesting it. Another good reason to have snails is that most species of snails will eat algae. Many of the snails mentioned will do a very good job of taking care of any algae you have in your tank. For example, nerite snails are one of the only animals that can deal with the infamous green spot algae that plagues many people's tanks. Another pro of keeping snails is that they can help you start a cycle in your aquarium. If you get a new aquarium and are worried about doing a fish in cycle and think that a fish list cycle is too complicated, then using snails can be a great in-between option. Snails are very hardy and have a high chance of surviving a cycle, and have a higher chance of surviving a cycle than most fish. They are also pretty fun to watch and can help with the boredom you get before stocking your tank. Another great benefit of getting snails is that they can serve as free food for many types of fish. As most of you know, pufferfish and some loach species love eating any kind of shelled creature like shrimp, snails, clams, and more. In fact, most species of pufferfish, shelled foods are necessary to trim down their beak-like teeth. If they don't have their teeth trimmed down, it makes it harder for them to eat and can kill them. Keeping and breeding snails will help you give variety to your puffers and loaches diets and help you save money. Finally, snails are just fun to watch. I love watching snails slowly eat away at algae and motor across the tank. I think if you give snails a chance, you will fall in love with their clumsy, methodical movements and their silly appearances. There are, however, some cons to keeping snails, but I think they are outweighed by the pros. The main con is that they produce a lot of waste once they start to overpopulate the tank. Most of the snail species that I mentioned are extremely prolific breeders and can easily overrun a tank and start producing a lot of nitrogenous waste once this happens. This can be managed though by monitoring your parameters and doing frequent water changes, although it can be a pain in the butt for some people to keep up with the waste that the snails produce. Another way that snails produce waste is through their population fluctuations. Since snails breed so fast, they sometimes produce more snails than your tank has enough food to support. This can cause the population to drop quickly, and while it may make your tank look less overcrowded, the large snail die-off can cause an ammonia spike, which is dangerous to all of your tank inhabitants. Once again, this can be dealt with and avoided fairly easily with frequent water changes and monitoring of parameters, but it can also be a pain to deal with and can catch you off guard. The other main con of snails is that when they start overrunning your tank with large numbers, it can be a major eyesore. This can be dealt with by simply putting less food in the tank, which will cause the snail population to drop, as I mentioned earlier. Now that we've analyzed the main pros and cons of keeping snails, and looked at several different snail species, I will give my final verdict on whether snails are pests or pets. I think that it ultimately comes down to what you want in your own aquarium, as it's your choice as whatever you stock in there. But I personally enjoy having snails in my aquariums. And I know that some people don't like their appearance or think they are a nuisance and just create too much waste in their tanks. But if overpopulation of snails is what's holding you back from getting them, I strongly suggest getting Nerite snails to start off, as they won't be able to breed in your tanks. Or maybe mystery snails as well, as they need special conditions to breed. I suggest you give snails a try before you make any final decisions about them. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.